Well, so I want to have an informal conversation with you. Who has already started a business here? In the context of the question, what are a couple of questions that you have that you want to make sure that today, during our time together, I answer? How about yourself? A question that you have to make sure that you want me to speak to? Someone else? It's okay, it's okay. Yes. Yeah. Oh, maybe your microphone. Okay, sorry. Can I have another microphone? Espera un momentito. Si hablas lento, quizás puedo hablar, entender, pero también así. Lo siento.
Bueno, pues mi inquietud es de asistir a esta conferencia, es precisamente tener una visión acerca de si puedo plantearme en mi objetivo como emprendedor el poder exportar, porque creo que esto es a lo que va la conferencia, y eso es lo que quisiera yo saber es, para los emprendedores, ¿qué nos puedes decir en cuanto a exportar?
Okay, I will do my best. I will do my best on my third point to speak to this. I have 3 points. So I'll make sure I speak to that specific idea.
Okay.
Another question? Actually, let me write this down. Sí.
Yes, related to what he said, in what moment is the best moment for an entrepreneur to think about that?
Okay.
About making
¿Cuándo?
links.
¿Cuándo es a otra parte del mundo? Okay. Muy bien.
Yo quisiera saber, soy arquitecto y tengo una aplicación para régimen de condominio. Entiendo que es un trabajo que se hace en todo el mundo y tenemos 8 años haciéndolo, tenemos la expertise, pero ya queremos saber cómo entrar en mercados internacionales.
How to enter the international markets. Okay. Sí. Creo que un más. Sí.
Bueno, yo tengo un centro ecoturístico y me gustaría generar grupos turísticos de otros países a México, en especial pues mis instalaciones. Y me gustaría saber cómo hacerlo.
Okay. I'll speak to the idea a little bit, and I'm not an expert at that, but I'll share some of my knowledge and some of my scar tissue, if that makes sense. So I have some ideas for you. Okay, so like I said, let's be informal. Si tienen preguntas, pregúntame, porque quiero tener una conversación. I want to have a conversation with you. I think that the only way to learn about entrepreneurship is to be in the conversation of entrepreneurship and to be building businesses together. And oh, okay.
And I want to open a new company about the consulting services, but I don't know if this moment is the better to in Mexico to open this kind of consulting services. It's basically about accounting, taxes, and to buy and to sell companies in order to evaluate this is the best moment to do it.
Okay, I'll speak a little bit about that. It's a little bit different topic than what I originally intended, but in some ways, I'll give you my short answer to that.
Yes.
The best time to start a business
Yes.
was yesterday.
No, in this moment.
No, I know. But it's like planting a tree. What's the best time to start a business?
Yeah.
10 years ago, And what's the best time if you didn't do it 10 years ago is now?
Just now.
Now, the question in this case is, it's more of how can you make sure that you don't risk everything?
Okay.
But starting a business, you should do it now. But how do we make sure you don't put all the chips out on the table already, right? I'll talk to you about that. And I think we'll have a little bit more time as we talk, because my slides are short, so that you can actually, so we can talk more about those type of things as well. Last one. Okay, no más after
Okay.
this.
I am a corn producer, but actually I'm going to produce berries, fresh food. In Europe and Asia and United States, they are looking to the producers directly, but there's an opportunity, but I don't know what do I have to do in terms of volume, like the containers and those things. I want to know things of that.
Okay, so on that, towards the end, when we start talking about specifics and specific cases, let's make sure I have an idea for you. My expertise is technology. In fact, I'll give you my background just so you see it. I don't know if, since the clicker's not working, could you click it? So my background is I've started companies in 3 different countries, United States, Mexico, Chile. I've started 7 different startups, like was said earlier. These are some of them. I've been on the front of Computer World magazine many years ago, and I had early success with my startups. And I got to work for this guy, if you know who Steve Jobs is. And it's because of that experience early in my career that I never knew about entrepreneurship. My family was fairly poor, especially in the case of the United States. And so I didn't know what entrepreneurship was until I worked for Next, the company that Steve Jobs started, and it was because of that I actually had this chance. Now, in my career, I've built systems for Dell, as an example. The first $2 billion worth of computers sold at Dell.com were sold on software I built in my living room. So I have some idea about how to build interesting, disruptive technology. My experience, to the point I was making, is it's not as much about general business, but more in technology business, but a lot of the concepts are very similar. So they're not the same, but they're similar. And I'll try to make sure that I do my best to tell you where I know something about this and what I don't know. Could I have the next slide? I think there's a problem with the clicker. Whoops. Oh, maybe now it works. One back, please. Okay, so we have worked at TechRanch with entrepreneurs from 27 different countries. You can see a few of them here. We actually have more than 27 countries represented on site at TechRanch. I'm quite proud of that because I think a lot of times opportunities in the age that we live in, you start a business and you can immediately be a global business in the age of the internet, right? And a lot of times with the entrepreneurs that have come from these different countries, they've used Austin and they've used TechRanch to build their businesses. But part of it is to find the right conversation about how to do that. I'm going to try this one more time. Okay, so we've worked with more than 5,500 entrepreneurs to kind of give you an idea. There's a little bit more about TechRanch. But there's 3 things that we think are important. The first is the focus on the entrepreneur versus the startup. And you should know, if you're looking at entering the US market, that you should be looking for the places that care about you, not just care about whether or not your startup or your company is investable. Part of the strength of the gringo mind is thinking about business, but part of the weakness is thinking about business and not thinking about you. The way we think of this is we start with entrepreneurs. We focus on the entrepreneur first and foremost. The second thing is we want to build global bridges. And people say, ¿por qué quiere puentes globales? Why do we want global bridges? Well, in my case, your country gave me a gift. Your country gave me a gift. And it's one of the reasons that I'm here to try to be of help. 21 years ago, my first dollars earned were pesos in Mexico. There was a bank in Guadalajara. The Casa de Bolsa had bought this bank, and they needed to integrate their systems. And I was a 24-year-old entrepreneur, and I didn't know a lot about business, and I certainly didn't know anything about business in Mexico. But this one bank needed our software, and they took a chance on us. And to the question you were saying earlier, I'm going to make sure that I'll tell you a little bit more of the story, because my story is the same as the question you asked. The question you asked is, like, why did I go to work in Mexico? Especially my first customer for my first startup. Why was it in Mexico? Well, one of the reasons I'm here to try to be of help is to say I want to repay Mexico for taking a chance on me as an entrepreneur. The third thing is I believe that all of us should be looking at how we can create social impact with our businesses. Part of the problem with the gringo mind is only to focus on business and to forget about the world. And part of what I want to actually have happen with Tech Ranch in the work that we do is to help entrepreneurs that are building businesses that will make the world a better place. And that's the idea behind these three things. I tell you this not to just talk about Tech Ranch, but to give you an idea as if you look, especially in the United States, for an accelerator or an incubator or a point of entry, or perhaps in some other country besides the US, you need to make sure that you're understanding what's their value system, what's their come from. Why is it they're doing what they're doing? Versus just find a place that's in business. And you can find it in the US. Not everyone has a gringo mind. Whoops. Yeah, right here. So the problem is anytime you start a business, you have to figure out how to get across what we call the venture valley of death. The idea is whether you're going into a new country, whether you're actually starting a business very new. This is the enemy. Many times people say cash flow and competition is the enemy, but the enemy actually is this. Because your biggest problems are not competition and cash flow. It's like whether or not you can actually get across the venture valley of death. It's been my experience that we can all find a way to find little niches that we can actually succeed. But a lot of times, when your business is right here, there's no investors other than maybe your uncle that are going to invest in you. And so the idea is, how do you actually create social capital, capital social, no solamente capital financiero. So this idea of financial capital versus social capital. Many entrepreneurs come to me and they don't yet have businesses that are investable because they're here. Part of what you'll hear about around the Tech Ranch is to focus on building social capital. I believe as well, between Texas, where I'm from, and Mexico, that we have closer culture. It's not the same, but it's closer. And so one of the things to be looking at as you look at different places, you try to build, these relationships that build the businesses, to have social capital, is to look, specifically to be looking for that as you look at how you're going to enter the market. So this brings up the question, and this is my first point, of how do you find your point of entry? How do you look for your port of entry? You actually have to look, how much does it cost? Right now, San Francisco, in technology startups, is very popular, but it's really, really, really expensive. And it's known on top of the world, but the problem is, if you're not in the community already, and you only have a few dollars to spend, I've heard story after story after story that the entrepreneurs just burn all their money very quick and get rejected. So you have to be careful about cost, especially as you're looking at the US market. The second is culture. Many people don't realize how different the culture is. The culture between California, Texas, and New York, as an example. The cultures are very, very different. Yes, we all speak English, but the culture in New York is very hard. The culture in San Francisco is kind of behind the scenes. The culture in Texas is much more in your face, but at least you know, the thing I like about Texas is you can at least know what people are saying to you, right? So looking at that. And then the third thing, and probably the thing that drives us more than anything else, is opportunity. In my case, there was an opportunity in Guadalajara, and my customer said, "We need you here." And I said, "Claro que sí." And so this is the idea as well, right? About how to look for the opportunity. And many times you can actually explore before you actually have to go make the commitment to live someplace. You can actually go take a little taste and see if you get the right connections into that without having to make the full commitment to moving there for a year or moving there for a certain period of time. Austin has been, Forbes magazine actually called Austin as the #1 city in the United States for entrepreneurship. And I'm going to tell you why that is, especially as you look at how you build the cultures of your cities here in Mexico. That, part of the power of Austin is 20 years ago when I started my first company, we didn't have the culture we have now. And so the part of what I want you to hear out of this is this idea that you can build a culture in your own city. But the other side of it too is to also be looking for the right culture to go to. In our case, we actually focus much more on cooperation than competition. You can see it if you walk down the street in Austin. And this is a very simple test for you to go to the US and just watch how many people look you eye to eye as they walk down the street. And how many people smile at you. It's a very interesting way of telling a lot about cities in the United States. It's just to go there, and people might think you're weird in certain cities if they see you staring at them, but you should actually go do that. It's a very simple test. Does it feel natural to just walk down the street wherever you might be, like in the downtown area, and do people smile? In Austin, this is one of the things I'm most proud of, is that actually we do that. And that's a thing to look for in the culture of the cities. And I think a lot of times people are surprised from other parts of the world how different the culture in Austin is than other parts of the United States. I'm not just trying to sell you on Austin, though. It's a test that you can actually take to other cities, because it might be that for your business, as an example, in selling fruit, that you need someplace else, right? That you need to enter some other market. But still, it's an interesting thing to look at. The second thing is, and you probably already have heard this, but you have to learn how to engage in the style of the place you're going. One of the things I love about Mexico, and yo nací en San Antonio, Texas. San Antonio es más mexicano que americano. En mi caso, me gusta que creemos una relación. We like to build a relationship, right? We like to build a relationship. It's very Mexican, and I'm soy tejano, right? I'm Texan, and I kind of like that. But most Americans, most Americans are not that way. Can you give me a click? Sorry, I think we have a little bit of a problem. Most Americans aren't that way. They're very, very direct. Americans want to hear about action first. And many times if you talk about their families, they're going to be a little bit standoffish. And so the thing to know is to realize that a lot of times there's a different style to use. Like in Mexico, especialmente cuando hablo en español, it's much more relational, it's much more warm, más cariños, right? Cariñoso. And it's actually kind of cool to see. But if you do that there, and if you try to establish relationship first, especially in New York or perhaps California, maybe a little bit in Austin, but if you try to do that first, they won't listen. Or they'll listen for a little bit, but then it'll just kind of shut off. So many times the thing that I know is to focus on action before relationship and try to figure out how can you and I, if you're the American and I'm the Mexican, how is it that we can take a little bit of relationship, a little bit of action first, a little bit of action. And it's almost like a test. on the American side. Like if you hear a phone call in the United States, if you hear a phone call in Mexico, how's your son? How's your mother? How are things going? You hear the same phone call in the United States. Okay, when are you going to get the stuff to me? What are we going to do with this? What happened on the delays? Oh, okay, how's your family? Right? It's inverted. There's a strength and a weakness to both types. And the main idea is to know to speak into the style of the other side, right? To speak into the style of the other side. And be sensitive to, now in my case, as an example, I'm a little bit more, I kind of like that other style. I'm still American, or I'm still a Texan, I should say. But, you know, it's like a little bit of both, And then finally, I was saying that Texas is much closer culture-wise in my case. I think it's much closer to Mexico. And so it's something to look at, even if you go to San Antonio or Dallas or Houston, than other parts of the United States. I'm not sure why that is, but it just seems much more natural. And perhaps if there are examples in a little bit when we open up the conversation, I'd like to actually hear examples from you guys as we talk about this. Click. Chileans. So I did business in Chile too. In 2003, I spent about 9 months there. I worked with around 1,000 entrepreneurs in Chile. Chileans are otra cosa. It's totally different. For the first 45 minutes of you meeting me, and if you're Chilean and I'm American or I'm whoever, or especially if I'm Chilean, I would spend 45 minutes just trying to understand who you are. Before any business. No negocios, not necessarily family stuff. Just, okay, which school did you go to? Okay, did you go, which year was it? Do you know this person? Okay, which political party? In fact, and many times, political parties there on the right and on the left won't touch each other. They won't touch each other. It's really, and there's a history of that, right? 40 years ago, there was a golpe, and there's still hard feelings about that. It's very understandable why there are two different sides. But the idea is, what's really interesting is if you do business in Chile, and there's opportunities. Chileans love Mexicans, by the way. You should know that. They absolutely love Mexicans, but one of the things that you'll have to get used to with every Chilean you meet is 45 minutes before anything else happens. For an American who wants to focus on action, it can drive Americans crazy, right? It can totally drive them crazy. But, in some ways, it wasn't until 7 years later. I was there in Chile for 9 months in 2003, but it wasn't until 2010 that I really started doing business there. 7 años. So it's something to think about. It's interesting because especially as we think about how we might work across the world together. But again, you have to be ready to speak into their culture. And if you haven't had an experience of that, just be aware. There's just like these little differences. So this says, recognize how technology has opportunity, but I want you to replace the word technology with any kind of product. And this is the secret of what we were talking about earlier, about how to know when to enter the market. Click. So this is called the technology adoption lifecycle. Even if you're not in technology, there's a way of actually using this, and you could read about this on Wikipedia. There's a way of actually recognizing where you might enter a market. I'm going to give you an example of this, but it's not just about technology. Like in the case of fruit, I'm sure there's an example as well. Like if you have organic fruit, or if you have a very special type of grape that's also organic, you might think of it that same way that I'm going to talk about technology. An example of say, the iPhone. If I had my iPhone, it's over here, but if I had my iPhone right here. Remember when the people would stand out in front of the Apple store for 2 days? Even though people knew that the phone was broken, right? There was a time the phone was broken, but people were still ravenous about the iPhone. that's right here. They're called early adopters. Early adopters are people, well, I'll tell you the blue part first. The blue part is innovators. These are people that are actually going to build something themselves. The blue part is for innovators. They're going to do things themselves, and there's no customer opportunity with them. But this red part is early adopters. What are early adopters? Early adopters will love you even if your product only works 60% of the time. Only some part of the time. And why is that? The reason that is because they have some deeper need. Like in your case, if you have organic fruit and you can actually deliver it in a certain way and there's not other competitors in the space. Or in my case, at 24 years old, when I had a technology that this bank in Guadalajara needed, I was 24 years old. I was young. And why would they take a risk on especially in banking, right? Banking is very, very conservative. Well, I had a technology that was very advanced. I couldn't sell it to other banks in Texas. I tried. And they were like, oh, you're too young. You're too young. There was a lot of pain in the case of this one bank. The Casa de Bolsa bought this bank, and they had to integrate the systems. And if they didn't integrate the systems, they actually were going to have problems with their business. And so my technology represented something that was unique, compelling, that they couldn't find. And so even though they were taking a risk for me being young and a new technology, that's where they are able to target. Now, in the case that you asked me earlier about how do you know when, it's always to look, can you find some interesting thing that sets your product apart? In technology, we say has different features. It has features that don't exist anywhere else. In the case of a commodity, like fruit, okay, well, let's have different features. Instead of just fruit, it's organic, right? And maybe you have special berries that no one else can get. And that makes it interesting, where someone will take a risk on it much earlier. Yeah, so he said also on delivery. The idea behind delivery, right? You have a special way of getting fruit to people just in time, so it can be cooked fresh every day, or it can be in the restaurants every day, or it can be in the market every day and be fresh, right? I would expect that's something new, right? Because most farmers don't have special delivery. They don't have immediate delivery. That's a good example. There's always an opportunity for you with a product if you think about what features it might have at that red space. And even though the red space is small, most of my career and most of the stories I could tell you, all the money I made was on the red space. Most of my businesses never went to anywhere else, to this other way, and that's okay, because it gave me more than enough opportunity to make money and start the next business, and start the next business, and start the next business. Now, some of you actually have businesses that are farther down, and that's okay. But the main thing is know that you can find these little niche opportunities, that the global market will always love you, even though it might be smaller than some of them. Maybe you're not going to be IBM. Okay. That's okay, right? But if you can make a $10 million business, you'll more than take care of your family and impact your community with it. And it's something to think about. Most people, when they look at markets, don't think about that. Like many times, I have entrepreneurs in the tech ranch who come to me and say, we have a $10 billion market. But where did Facebook start? Does anyone know where Facebook started as an example? Facebook, it's a Harvard, right? The first customers of Facebook were only at Harvard. They only were at Harvard, and then they went to the universities in the Ivy League, which is just a small number, and then they went to colleges, and then they went to young professionals, then they went to older professionals, and now my mother uses Facebook, right? My mother wouldn't touch Facebook. Why is my mother using Facebook? My mother's using Facebook because she wants to see pictures of her grandkids. And she wants to know where her son is, what part of Mexico or where in the world, right? But And my mother over here represents a huge market, but you have to do all this work before that. So as you're thinking about entering into a new global market, the key thing is, how can you focus on this small place? This small place. No, it's not a $1 billion business, but it's big enough. And if you can create the Harvard, then you have the chance to go to the next level, and the next level, and the next level. Many entrepreneurs come to me and they say, I have a $10 million market. But there's no way that year they're going to be able to get into the $10 million market, right? And so you should think of, how can I create a very small market but enter it? Like for me, having access to this one bank and this one Casa de Bolsa in Guadalajara was amazing. I knew something about Casa de Bolsas in Estados Unidos. I mean, I actually had built a trading system for Fidelity Investments, right? And so I knew something about that. And I was able to use that to enter this one little market, and then this next, and the next, and the next. That's how it always goes. That's how the Facebook story happened. So don't focus on just trying to dominate a market. Focus on where you can land and have a niche that you can control and, eat healthily off of. So, and then go from there. There's a really good Wikipedia article about this. If you want to read more about this, just go to Wikipedia, both in Spanish and English, and you can just read about this concept. But the key thing is, you're looking at whether you have technology or not. Look for the red part. Now, the chasm, so you know what this is when your product is really new, or perhaps you're from Austin, Texas, and you're selling into Guadalajara, right here is where that bank was. And then to build my company to the next level, I had to figure out, how can I actually sell to more customers, where the closer they get here, the better the product has to be, the higher quality the product has to be. When I started, my product was still very kind of rough. So the chasm is saying, okay, these people will adopt early, but these people will take a risk. These people don't want to take a risk, but they will actually adopt your product early. And you have to listen, especially if you're going to go across to another culture, like we were just saying in the previous slide. You have to listen for what are the key parts that they're looking for. That's what I actually was just talking about. So, and then the last idea is, be willing to explore. One of the things that Silicon Valley and Austin have is, we take risk. And we live in a culture that it's okay to take risk. The cool thing about Mexico is, Mexico has a fairly entrepreneurial culture. Chile, if you take a risk in Chile and you screw up, it's bad. It's a terrible thing. If you take a risk in many Asian cultures, it's even worse, right? We do business in Japan as an example, and if you take a risk and you fail in Japan, it's even worse. Well, upon coming to the United States, if you're thinking about the US market, there's a little bit more acceptance about taking a risk, as long as you're upfront about it with your customer. If you're upfront about where the risks are, they'll be more open about that. The main thing is, instead of putting all the money out, how can you just do this much, this much, this much, this much, right? One of the reasons that TechRanch has 27 different countries represented at it is, we figure out ways of actually helping it be a very small cost compared to some of the places you might go in the United States. And the idea is, you should look for that. How can you actually try an experiment? And in the US, it's okay to take an experiment. As long as we know what's happening, it's okay. You just have to make sure that it's upfront about that. Be willing to explore. It's like in this case, click. One of our entrepreneurs just came. Actually, I think is David here. Actually, one of the friends of TechRanch is actually based out of Tijuana, Mexico. I was in Tijuana 2 months ago, and I gave a speech. Actually, Guillermo in the back is actually here from Tijuana as well. So one of his friends and colleagues and one of my friends in Tijuana actually told a guy in Belgium, hey, you should go to a tech ranch. And instead of moving the whole thing, he actually just said, okay, I want to take this much time. The main idea I'm trying to say is figure out how you can design a small experiment. Just an experiment, not where you do everything and take the big, big risk. But in the case of this guy from Belgium, he just took a small risk. He came over to Austin. He stayed there for a while. He took some of our educational programs. But the whole power of that was, it wasn't that expensive comparatively to actually moving houses and things like that. And you can do that. It's like in this case, click. I practice Aikido. Aikido is a martial art. Many of us practice different sports, right? None of us were good at the sport that we started when we started. So why is it that when we do this entrepreneurship thing, we think we have to be perfect? Why is it that, like, when we're learning entrepreneurship, we think we have to be perfect? But when we're learning sports, we understand that getting scars, like I have a scar right here from surgery last year. Last year when I was at Semana de Emprendedor, I actually had a cast because I had just lost use of this arm for 3 months. And it happens in Aikido. And obviously I still have something to learn about Aikido if I'm having to have major surgery to put my arm back together, right? It's the same thing with business. And so all I suggest to you is when you think about business, gracias. When you think about business, and you think about especially going to doing global business, realize global business is a contact sport, just like soccer or football. And you have to take little risk and then get better and get better and get better and get better and get better. We all know this because we all learned to drive the same way. We all learned things in school, but for whatever reason, when we start in business, we forget this. And so I just say, remember that part of the process of when I went to Chile in 2003, I didn't know anything about doing business in Chile. And I just thought, well, maybe it's like Mexico. No, not at all. So you have to learn little experiments, ask a few people, get connected to a community of people who actually will help you. And then do that. Don't try to do it alone, right? It's just like you never learn a sport alone. You either have a coach or you have a bunch of team members. You never learn something alone. So why as entrepreneurs are we trying to act like we're going to learn business alone? It doesn't make sense. To have practice on it and realize you might have problems. Just make sure that you take small risk so it's not everything, right? Yeah, click. So in our examples, this is just some examples of some of the projects we've done globally. I've done a lot of business globally, but I still don't consider myself an expert at global business. And you should know that, right? To create a little bit of self-acceptance about the idea that we're all getting stronger. Someone asked me earlier when I said that I had a coach, there was like, you have a coach? Yes, I have a coach. I think I need a coach so I can get better. And everyone here, we all have an opportunity for that. But some of the examples of stuff that we've done is we took a project to the Atacama Desert in the north of Chile, and we connected 16 different companies to the water companies there and the mining companies there, and it was really interesting to see what happened. We have a project we just started with Canada, where we're going to be helping Canadian entrepreneurs, both in Winnipeg and Manitoba, Canada. And the idea is this is another experiment. Another experiment in Japan. We just opened an incubator there. And even though I've studied Japanese martial arts, I don't know anything about Japan. I'm learning. And so the idea is I want you to see that same thing, that it's just like anyone in this room, it's a part of the process of learning and getting stronger. We think we have some insight, but I think all of us have something to still learn. And you should remember that's an important way of thinking about it. Click. So we're going to give away a couple of different seats in our Venture Start online program. Venture Start is a great program for the early stages of the venture. It's also good if you want to get a little bit packaged in a gringo kind of way. It's got a little bit of that for helping. And if you give me your email addresses, or if you tweet at me, this is my Twitter. If you tweet at me and say Venture Start, hashtag Venture Start, I'd be happy to put you into the list. I also have some cards, or if you have a business card, just give it to me, and I'm going to hand them all to my director of marketing, and she'll decide based on how many people are there of how many she'll pull out to send you a free seat in Venture Start. I'm going to put it all in her hands. But this is me, and I also have a bunch of free videos that we do about business. Just follow us, and you can actually take advantage of that. There's a lot of free webinars and free other things that we do, especially they are in English mainly. Every once in a while we do webinars in Spanish, like we've been doing some stuff with Colombia. And yes, I want to do it for Mexico too. So, the main thing is give me your email address, and I'll put you into that list. You can either tweet at me right now or in the next couple hours, or before you leave, give me an email address, and I'll make sure. Just make sure I can read it. Actually, make sure my director of marketing can read it. So write really slow, and make sure it's good from that standpoint. And yeah, there will be a handful of free offerings about that. It's a $125 value. I hope that you get value out of it. The guy who was in Belgium that then decided to go to Austin, he actually took this class first. It was his first taste of getting packaged in a kind of in the way that I teach. And so it'll give you an idea of how to start down that path, about how to, in the question you're asking, how to dip your toe in the water to just barely, take the step forward. And for everyone that actually gives me their email address, even if you don't win, we're going to give you a discount on this program, just because it's my way of trying to pay back my debt to this bank into Mexico. So, click. So this is at the end of our presentation. I guess if you did anyone not get the information on the previous slide that we should switch back, we'll now talk in general, unless I should have them flip this back. Anyone? Okay, so if you didn't get the Twitter ID and you want to be a part of this, I'll talk to you a little bit longer, so we don't have to immediately leave until they tell me to get off the stage. But make sure that if nothing else, before you leave, just if you want to be in that list, and it'll be written in Spanish, but if you want to be on that list, to give us your email address. Okay, with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. What kind of questions do you guys have? I think I addressed at least some of the ones that were asked earlier. I'm not sure I got to everybody. But, ¿preguntas? Yes, sir. Ya, ¿tenemos otro micrófono?
Hi, my name is Gerardo, and I have a small collectibles business in Querétaro. I came here mostly because I was wondering if Mexico is really the nice place to have a collectibles, plastic collectibles, like business, since I'm just starting and I'm having a lot of doubts about it.
So if you, ¿cuánto tiempo tenemos? ¿Tenemos tiempo? Okay, yeah. 5 minutes? Okay. So if it's your passion, it's like his question. The gentleman right here, when should I start a business? If it's your passion, you should experiment with it. And don't think about for collectibles can go around the world, right? They're small.
Yes, this small.
So obviously you can ship them easily, and the market for something like that is a global market. I mean, you could actually even figure out how is it. Querétaro is not that far away. I mean, I've driven all the way to San Miguel from Austin. You know, it's not a short drive, but it's short enough that you could figure out, okay, how to actually launch stuff from Laredo and ship it from Laredo if you have to, right? And figure out but the main thing is to have the mind of experimenting on it. And don't think about it just in Mexico. Don't think, I mean, a business like that you could actually take easily to the world. And, you know, find some group of people in Germany that just have to have your collectibles, right? Or some other part of the world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What, other questions about that?
Do I have to do it like via eBay, or I make my own store?
You know, the thing I've seen is I've seen a lot of people be very successful with eBay. The other thing to look at is there's sites like Etsy and there's probably what type of collectibles are they?
Marvel and DC, they are called HeroClix. They are like a board game you personalize with Marvel and DC
I'm willing to
characters.
bet, so any technology goes through the stage of, do you know anything of computer processors? I'm going to give you an example. Sorry to be a geek, but I'm a geek. So they go from general processors to no tengo las palabras en inglés, tampoco. They go from general to kind of more specific to very specific. Something like that. I bet you there are sites that are going to be, if they're not there already, that will actually be just for that. So you can find vendors on eBay, but I want to bet that you'll find it over here too, where it's really specific just around that. I bet you don't even have to start a site for that. I would look for it, but the main thing is see if you can design an experiment, a small experiment. And not a 6-month experiment, and not figure out what could you do by the end of next week. And then what I want you to do is I want you to tell me what you did and tweet at me and say, this is what my experiment was and this is what I did, and I'll respond back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. But it's got to be a week from now. You have 7 days to figure out something that you can do as an experiment to test how this might be. And only 7 days. And, you know, get a couple of friends to give you ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then tweet at me.
I did it. Okay.
You promise?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, perfecto. ¿Algo más? Sí.
Well, thank you. What I think to ask you is that how do you define the experience to talk about business with other people that they are not from your country? How do you, I don't know.
The harder thing to do is to make sure that you're having conversations with entrepreneurs. For 10 years, my mother told me, don't you want to go get a job? For 10 years. I made more money in the first 4 months of my first business than I had in the 2 years before that. But my mother, for 10 years, told me, don't you want to go get a job? It's all she knew. So the thing to do is if you're looking across borders, whether they're between Mexico, Chile, or the United States, is make sure that you're having conversations with other entrepreneurs, because the conversation will be different. There's enough pain. There's a difference between the entrepreneur versus the business person. The business person will not know some of the pains that the entrepreneur will endure. And that's true in my country, it's true in your country, it's true in other countries. Now, because of that shared pain, I think you'll find entrepreneurs that want to have conversations with you. Like in his case, it's about collectibles. In your case, it's around another business. I think you'll find people that want to talk to you. The other thing to look at is if you're looking to the United States, because you're a woman, you will find women's groups that will actually be very open to those kind of conversations. I mean, in the United States, it's really interesting. Women have a big opportunity that men don't. And it's interesting. So because you're a woman, you might just be aware that there are going to be groups that will be open to you. The thing to look for on that case would be look for online groups to start, and then pick a city, and then at some point plan on your next vacation being a work vacation, where you go to that city and actually get integrated in. Look for meetup groups, look for other things like that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Tengo una pregunta relacionada con joint venture. En el caso de los negocios de riesgo compartido, si son recomendables para un emprendedor que está innovando por primera vez, ¿qué porcentaje se compromete de la aplicación en el caso de un negocio compartido con las aceleradoras?
So it's like mi pregunta es the risk. What percentage is the shared risk?
¿Qué
I think I missed some
porcentaje,
part of what.
¿Qué porcentaje del negocio
What percentage of the business?
es el que puede llegar a comprometer de un desarrollo de una aplicación a través de un modelo de riesgo o de joint venture?
Okay. The main thing in that case, I would actually have you think about it in a slightly different way. If at all possible, I mean, in my case is not necessarily right, but it's an idea. I had a Russian in Moscow build an application for me. And in about 2 years of work, I only heard his voice once. And you have to ask, ¿cómo es posible, right? How is it possible that I spent tens of thousands of dollars on a guy that I never met, in a country I've never been to, and I only heard his voice once? The secret that I have is the first experiment was very small, very small. It was like maybe a few $100s worth of work. And percentages of a company that's much more difficult to do. But the thing I would actually have you do is think about how you can make the first thing very small. Because there's an example of another business that I actually did some work with on a shared risk problem. And because I come from a cooperative culture from Austin, but they come from a screw each other culture, when things went wrong, he immediately thought I was trying to screw him. And I'm like, no, we're cooperative. Yes, I know martial arts, and if I have to fight, I'll fight. And I will fight fully. And I will not stop when I start fighting. You have to figure out how can you actually go through that psychological part of the risk and the joint venture together in a small way, in a bigger way. In the same way that this Russian I know nothing about, I spent probably $25,000 with. I never heard his voice but just once. So the question is, how can you actually construct that relationship so that you can take a little risk together? It's like the first date, right? We're not going to get married the first night. We're going to go out on a date, then we're going to go out on another date, then another date. Then, maybe I get to meet her mom, and then another date, right? Same thing, if you can. I know that that's not as simple as my explanation, but see if you can figure out a way of doing it, because too many people risk everything in the very beginning, and that doesn't need to be that way. Do we have time for no more? No más? Okay. Entonces, it's my honor to be here with you. I really do appreciate what your country did for me. I'm serious about that, about giving me a chance. And in the same way I had a chance, you have a chance as well. The market is big, and in the age of the internet, you have access to the market. Even if you're selling fruit, you have access to the market. And even if you're selling collectibles, you have access to the market. There are no walls for the internet. And quiero que creamos puentes, no paredes. But remember that remember that we have the internet to be able to do that, and we can actually build a world that works with each other, and I'd like to do that with you. There's an expression that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If we want to go far, go together. And so I like to go far together with you. Good luck with your businesses. It's an honor to be here with you today. Thank you for your time.